Protesters are calling for a revolution in Haiti. Will an economic crisis cost the president his job? I'm Adnan Nawaz, and today's newsmaker is Haiti's political unrest. An activist on the street summed it up for reporters. The price of the dollar is going up, and we can't stay in this situation. We decided to see it through to the end. Well, that end may be the political career of President Jovenel Moise, and if it comes to that, it won't have been peaceful. Already, waves of demonstrators have converged on the square outside the presidential palace. They were met by police. Tear gas filled the air. A journalist was shot. During the past week, this has been the atmosphere in Port-au-Prince, with many not daring to leave their homes. Those who have tried to reach grocery stores, they have found the shelves empty. Haider Abbasi has more.
These riots began as protests against the government, but escalated as police cracked down. Several people have been killed as protesters demand the president resign.
I'm in this situation because of Jovenel Moise. I can't go to school. Jovenel is a thief. He must go. If not, we'll burn down the whole country. We're in the streets until he leaves.
Moise has been in power for 2 years, but the demonstrators say he's done nothing to improve their lives, and they accuse him of being corrupt. Moise denies this and has refused to step down.
We went to elections and a part of the population voted. I am president. I am ready to speak to all of my brothers and sisters over the difficulties the country is facing.
There's been no response from the opposition. Since October, there have been sporadic protests and riots in Haiti. They were triggered by a report that said development funds from Venezuela were lost or squandered. $2 billion is missing. Haiti's previous government, led by Michel Martelly, is accused of embezzlement. Moise promised to tackle corruption when he was elected, but he's done little to find out where the missing money has gone, and no one's been held to account. Haiti is considered to be one of the most corrupt countries on the planet. Transparency International ranks Haiti 161 out of 180 nations on its corruption index. And it seems Haitians have had enough. Protesters are also frustrated by endemic poverty, high unemployment, and rising living costs. The value of the currency has also dropped, and inflation sits at 15%. Haiti is the poorest country in the Americas. 60% of its people live on less than $2 a day. Successive governments have failed to lift the nation out of extreme poverty. Will the current one survive the protests? And if so, can Moise turn Haiti's fortunes around? Haider Abbasi, The Newsmakers.
Well, let's go to our panel now. In Port-au-Prince is Etzer Emile. He's an economist and the author of the book Haiti Has Chosen to Become a Poor Country. In Boston is Brian Concannon, a human rights lawyer and the director at the Institute for Justice and Democracy in Haiti. Also joining us is Michael Dibert. Michael is a visiting scholar at Franklin Marshall College. He's written extensively on Haitian issues. Gentlemen, thank you very much indeed for joining us on the Newsmakers. Etzer, should President Jovenel Moise step down?
I don't know if I should say that, but I think he should really think about it. Maybe if it's the best way for the country to become calm and stable, maybe. But if he thinks there's a way he can drive the dialogue to stay in power, why not?
Brian?
He has 3 years left on his term, so he's entitled to stay. But many sectors of Haitian civil society, including the business community, including the churches, including most political parties, have either said he should leave or intimated that he should seriously consider leaving. I agree with Etzer that there needs to be a solution to the crisis. This is currently unsupportable, and that the president's departure should be on the table.
Michael, so here's the issue. Haiti is a country with so many different problems. Surely it's beyond the capacity of a one-term government to solve them, and that any government should surely be laying the groundwork for the next government to take over and build from that, and then so on and so on. If the president were to resign, How would it possibly solve Haiti's problems?
Well, I think you're getting to the heart of one of the big issues here, which is that these problems that are kind of dogging Haiti from one government to the next, they cross parties, they cross ideologies, and at the root of them, I would say, are a couple things. One is you have a hard grain of impunity that benefits political and economic actors kind of across the spectrum, and that goes from government to government. Another problem, I would say, that you see in the decreasing participation of the population in the electoral process is there's kind of a loss of faith in terms of the electoral process being able to address these issues. So you have someone elected, and then 2 years later, people are in the streets saying that they should be removed. That happened with Preval, it happened with Martelly, it's happening with Jovenel Moise now. So what I think we need in Haiti is a process that will address all of those issues rather than simply looking at it as just a, a brief kind of political problem, because I think the underlying things are a lot deeper than that.
That's a really important point, but are the people on the streets going to make those kind of considerations?
Yeah, that's the biggest issue, because I think the crisis is very deep, and it's not something that just happened in 2019. It's a process for like years now, like over 3 decades now of bad management, bad decision, and we end up in death. So it's not like you remove the president today, and tomorrow you'll be able to resolve all the problem. And that's the big issues. So people they're still facing hunger, starvation, and bad service in terms of health, electricity. And that's the concern now, how we can solve those problems beyond a resignation of a president.
Brian, you wanted to come in?
Yes, people on the streets are articulating their demands in terms of President Moise's departure, but they're all clear that this is a systemic issue that is the result of centuries of problems, including the impunity issue that Michael mentioned, but also foreign interference, and that goes back to France extorting an independence debt that took Haiti 100 years to pay back. It goes right through the U.S. occupation, marine occupation a century ago, to overthrowing a democratically elected government in 2004. And Haitians are clear that President Moise needs to go, but that is as a start to changing the system. So everybody agrees that you need a systemic change, and that includes better governance in Haiti. It also includes less negative interference by the international community.
Okay, so let's look beyond the president's own particular position. Apart from the fact that he hasn't fulfilled his promise to look into this great corruption scandal of PetroCaribe and the billions of dollars that went missing. When you look at a country like Haiti and relate its problems to another part of the world, where all three of you are talking about decades-long problems that haven't been sorted out, quite often you look in other countries, and I need you to tell me if this is the case for Haiti, but in other countries you look at an elite, a socio-economic as well as a political elite that becomes self-serving and protects its interests over those decades. Is that one of the big issues in Haiti? Michael?
I would say there are various elites in Haiti that benefit from impunity and corruption. And a couple years ago, actually a decade ago, almost exactly a decade ago, I interviewed someone named Michel Pierre-Louis, who was the prime minister at the time for René Preval. And the way she articulated, she said that the elites, these various elites, are like an elephant sitting on the country that won't allow it to move forward. And I think a lot of times when people outside of Haiti hear that term, they think of kind of, for lack of a better way of articulating it, the traditional economic elite that sits in nice mansions above the hill, which certainly exist. But there's also different elites as well. I mean, a lot of the people who are in the political class of Haiti, have basically never had a job doing anything else, and they live off political chaos in the country. And that's been the case for, many, many years. One other thing I would say that's important in terms of looking around the region, I think there are some examples of a productive way you could address this problem in Haiti around the region. In Guatemala and in Honduras, for example, there are two hybrid organizations, half kind of international, half local, that prosecute organized crime and corruption and its links to the state. The one in Guatemala, CICIG is its acronym, has been extremely successful. They put a sitting president in prison. They put a vice president in prison. They're currently lodging charges against another former president. And I think, that's a real model that we could look at in Haiti, for example. I don't think the the situation is completely as hopeless as it's often depicted, maybe.
I'm glad you're pointing us in the direction of possible solutions, Michael. Can you pick up on that point there, Brian?
It's actually more dangerous to not have a transition at this point than there is to have a transition. I think there's a broad civil society consensus emerging about what could happen with a transitional government, and I think there's lots of opportunities for that to be peaceful and constructive. I think what people are actually most worried about is the government trying to hang on by shooting itself out of this problem. And those concerns are in large part justified by a massacre on November 13th where police and gangs affiliated with the government killed 70 people. But there certainly is a good possibility of a peaceful transition.
Allegedly.
And I think it's essential that the international community support that rather than support the horses that they believe are in the race.
Sorry, Michael, were you interjecting there? Do you want to say something?
Oh yeah, I mean, I was saying, I think in Haiti, you know, there's a couple different levels to any kind of civil unrest that's going on. There are people who have legitimate grievances, and I just say this, you know, having seen the political context in the country for whatever 20 plus years or something. You have people who are legitimately protesting about things, and then you have you know, opportunists such as some in the opposition who have been very clear that they don't want to follow the Constitution. I mean, André Michel, who's one of the big spokesmen for the political opposition, which isn't exactly the same as the civil society, there's a distinction to be made, said that they don't want to follow the mandate, which is that the Prime Minister and a Council of Ministers would oversee a transitional government until new elections could be held. Now that's mandated in Haiti's constitution, but it seems like some among the opposition are not interested in following that. And I would say also one thing, you know, getting back to this problem of impunity, I mean, it's something that we've seen for many, many years. I mean, the Duvalier family ran Haiti for almost 30 years and committed terrible human rights abuses, which were never really punished. I mean, when I was in Haiti in 2004, you know, under the Aristide government, there were terrible abuses under that. They were never punished. They were never punished under, you know, Martelly, who was the predecessor of Jovenel Moise. And it's something that is mutually beneficial to all the political actors in Haiti. So even though they might be at one another's throats in the street, this idea that you can pretty much get away with anything, no matter how terrible it is, as long as you have the right connections, is, I think, something that benefits all of these political actors, as you would call them, all these elites in Haiti. And it's that grain that I think could be addressed by a hybrid body such as CICIG, a CICIG-like body for Haiti.
Okay, listen, just in the last few minutes, let's take it down right to street level and look at the life of average, if we can call them, Haitians. 60% of the population living on less than $2 a day, okay? But first of all, Etsa, you're in Port-au-Prince. Have you been out and about around the town over the past few days while these protests have been going on?
Yes, I got a chance to visit a little bit, a couple of neighborhoods not far. And I see now we move from a political crisis, economic crisis, to a humanitarian crisis. It's really scary what we're having right now. And then we don't know exactly when that's going to stop. So I think first we have to restore the state capacity to really secure people. Now we have a government who has failed to really show that it's in power. And second, to really restore the confidence, because people now, they don't believe in government words. They don't believe in president's speech. That's why the president hasn't speech. The prime minister, they didn't say a word for 8 days because they don't know what to say to really convince people and then to really address the real issue.
Okay, Brian, just very briefly, if you can, how do you address the problems in a country like Haiti, which has such extreme levels of poverty? That in itself presents a huge challenge, doesn't it?
It does, but there are solutions. There are other countries who have made their way out of poverty. There's a roadmap, and what you need is you need to invest in people. You need to have the government providing basic government services, including education, including health care, including potable water. You need the international community to respect Haitians' choice of how they want to govern their country. And you need to have the government redistributing wealth in a way that brings the entire country into the government and ends 200 years of exclusion.
Okay, and also finally, just briefly, if you could, Michael, if that is to be a solution, my understanding is that the Haitian government just doesn't have the money to be able to spend on public services as it would wish to, which then lends itself to the question that it would have to borrow money. And if it has to borrow money, we all know what sort of imposition organizations like the World Bank and the IMF impose on countries. Would they expect more austerity from the Haitian government? That doesn't seem totally to be straightforward at all. Of course, Brian says spend more money, but where is the money?
What I would say is, in my experience going around Haiti, you can see grassroots organizations built and operated by Haitians that do extraordinary jobs changing their community. There's one in a neighborhood called Cité Soleil in Port-au-Prince, which is one of the poorest neighborhoods in the country, called Combit Soleil Levé. There's another one called La Coulapé, which works in marginalized communities. There's another organization called Focal, which is the branch of the Open Society Institute in Haiti. And these organizations are not organizations that are, completely rolling in money, but there's a commitment there to make a change, and there's a commitment there to have a dialogue among different sectors of Haitian society and to reach some sort of understanding of a common humanity. And I think these organizations are where you really find the hope to move the country forward, and they point a path forward for the country as a whole.
Brian, Michael, thank you very much indeed for your time. You've all been coming at it pretty much from the same angle. We did have an agreement with the Foreign Minister, Bochit Edmond, to come on to the program, but he was otherwise detained. He said he was on his way to the airport and he'd like to reschedule the interview, but we had the three of you, so we went ahead with it, and we really appreciate your time. Thanks very much indeed. After the break, TRT World's documentary team goes inside the French Yellow Vests movement. We ask if President Macron can meet their demands. And if you hate Valentine's Day, you're not alone. We hear why these people in Pakistan rebel against February the 14th for religious reasons. A piece of safety equipment found in every single car in France now represents a revolutionary movement. Yellow vests have choked the roads of major cities as hundreds of thousands of people protest against economic and social problems. President Emmanuel Macron has launched what he calls a grand debate. He's encouraging his citizens to tell him their grievances. But the activists say the president must go. TRT World's documentary series Off the Grid went to France to understand why the young leader is facing the fight of his political life.
Like everyone here, Jasmine struggles to pay her bills.
Les amis, les gilets jaunes!
So when the government decided to increase taxes on fuel, she joined the Yellow Vest movement. The movement started with blockades at roundabouts outside Paris. Hundreds of makeshift camps were built at crossroads. Not only to stop people, but also to rally as many as possible. But people like Com decided to take their protests to the capital.
C'est le symbole de la République, Paris. Paris, c'est le symbole de la démocratie dans le monde. Enfin, il y avait Athènes avant, mais aujourd'hui, Paris, c'est vraiment on est le pays des droits de l'homme. C'est la capitale des droits de l'homme. Donc nous, en tant que citoyens français, on veut faire valoir nos droits de l'homme ici.
The Champs-Élysées, one of the most famous avenues in the world. At first, the Yellow Vests came here with one message, but then their demands grew, and their rallies became more violent. Leaving destruction and damage to symbols of capitalism. What began as a peaceful movement became a national threat. In response, the government scrapped the planned tax hikes and deployed tens of thousands of security forces across the country.
On sent qu'il y a certaines personnes qui se radicalisent parce qu'ils ne sont pas entendus. Ils ne sont pas entendus. Si au 5 du mois, vous êtes en découvert, au 15 du mois, vous ne pouvez plus acheter à manger, il y a un moment, c'est l'instinct de survie qui revient.
Jasmine's survival strategy starts on the first day of every month.
Vous arrivez à aller faire des courses?
Ce mois-ci, non, je peux pas. Suite à la panne de ma voiture, ça m'a mis un peu, entre guillemets, dans la misère. C'est très difficile d'en parler parce que, ma fierté, quoi.
Everything in her fridge has been given to her by members or supporters of the movement.
C'est un don, c'est les dons, c'est la population, c'est le peuple. C'est le peuple, merci. Je grignote, et au pire, je mange même pas, je laisse pour mes enfants. Je mange qu'au travail, c'est tout.
Jasmine is a social worker, but it's only part-time. She earns $1,000 a month for her and her 2 sons. Her president has Jasmine desperate, but also angry, and not only because of his policies.
On est méprisé par ce monsieur. Méprisé. On veut rien, on est des feignants. Il faut qu'on traverse la rue pour trouver un travail. Bien sûr, évidemment.
It took Emmanuel Macron more than 3 weeks to react. 3 weeks during which discontent grew into disgust. So when the president finally appeared on television to address the people of France,
les événements de ces dernières semaines dans l'Hexagone et Outre-mer ont profondément troublé la nation. Ils ont mêlé des revendications légitimes et un enchaînement de violences inadmissibles.
it was widely seen as too little, too late.
Oh, j'en ai gros sur le cœur, quoi. Je pensais que Macron, c'est un jeune. Il va amener quelque chose de nouveau, quelque chose de bien pour les Français. On s'est planté, hein. On s'est planté. On s'est complètement planté. Il ne regarde pas ce qui se passe en France. Il regarde pas ce qui se passe dans le pays, dans la ruralité, ce qui se passe en bas.
One of those places down there is 400 kilometers south of Paris, a former coal mining town in the Burgundy region. Jean-Jacques used to go down 1,000 meters in a mine like this one. Today, he spends most of his time at this roundabout, built on top of a former mine. What's at stake goes beyond Emmanuel Macron's economic policies.
Il y a deux France. Il y a Paris et quelques grandes métropoles, quoi. Et puis il y a le reste de la France où on crève. On crève, il n'y a pas d'autre mot. Moi, j'habite à un village à 7 km, donc en un an, ils ont fermé le centre des impôts, ils ont fermé la poste. On a une épicerie qui a fermé et on n'a plus d'entreprise, c'est le désert rural, quoi. Il n'y a plus rien. Toutes les semaines, dans mon village, il y a une maison qui est en vente, quoi, et qui n'est pas rachetée.
Emmanuel Macron launched a 2-month grand national debate.
Toutes les questions sont ouvertes.
Where citizens can present their views.
Les gens peuvent qualifier et on ne forme pas les chômeurs. D'évaluer les formations parce que bien souvent, l'union, la formation, ça fait des années et des années que c'est une structure qui perd énormément d'argent.
Normalement, soit amendé, on va dire.
Les gilets jaunes, ils sont sur les ronds-points. Dans une démocratie, les désaccords se purgent au moment de l'élection.
He might have given them a voice. But as their anger becomes more visible than their suffering, will he be able to hear their grievances?
I'm joined now by TRT World's executive producer of our Off the Grid series, Alexandra Poliat, is here with me. And in Paris, the EU affairs expert, Alexis Poulain, joins us from there. Alexis is also the founder of the Modern World News website. Alexis, thank you very much indeed for joining us from Paris. Bear with me for a moment because I want to start with my colleague, Alexandra. For me, personally fascinating that you, a French national should have made this documentary about this Yellow Vest movement. We've seen 13 consecutive weeks of protests across the country. What stood out for you as a French person going to cover your country, which is having protests, which I believe are probably the biggest protests in the country since those 1960s student riots in Paris?
I mean, they are quite unprecedented. And although, I mean, France, like my country, is a country that is no stranger to protest at all, we are quite used to it. We're quite used to like seeing people taking to the streets to demonstrate against like the government policy or whatever else. But this one was really different, and it was really different first by the kind of like the level of violence that's basically occurred at the beginning of December. I think came as a huge surprise to many people. I mean, we had like those yellow vests occupying like roundabouts for like 3 weeks or so, a bit of demonstration in Paris and big cities, but then all of a sudden in every single international TV network, you could see like the pictures of Paris on fire, basically. People on the Champs-Élysées, people on one of the wealthiest areas of France, like getting very angry. So I think that's the first thing that basically like really struck me, and that was one of the reasons why we decided that we should go and try to find out that what is really going on behind the violence. So going to Paris at first, then I decided to go immediately outside of Paris, because what is very different between this movement and others as well is like this movement is really deeply rooted outside of the capital and outside of big cities. So, and then we spent a lot of time on roundabouts talking to like people, normal people, about their frustration, the reason why they were so unhappy. And what really surprised me was to see the level of public support that they were enjoying. Everybody was like stopping, talking to them. And it looked like all of a sudden, I was discovering a kind of like completely different aspect of my country. Like realizing all of a sudden that millions of people basically didn't have money on the 10th of the month, if not the beginning of the month. So I think that was one of the most surprising things for me.
Alexandra, some of the best information I've gotten from you while you've been working through to the final product of this documentary has come while we've been standing around the coffee machine, and I'm going to bring out some of those facts. So you talk about how much money people earn, but let's go to Alexis now. Alexis, is this the support that Alexandra is talking about? Is it truly emblematic of a national movement? Many people have said that the outside world has slightly got it wrong, that it's not quite the revolution that TV news networks are portraying.
There is still a majority support in the French population for the Yellow Vest movement, above 55%, and it was 60%, and above 70% at the beginning of the movement. So it's still there, and it says a lot about the invisible people of France that decided to put on the Yellow Vest, because whenever you switch on the television or read the newspaper, it never talks about the reality of the lives of these people in the region or in big cities, meaning that it's difficult, even with a job, to finish the month, to raise your kids, and to look for a brighter future. So I think the support is still there. It's something that is very rooted in the French population, but not only the French population. I would say that it's something that you can see worldwide. It started maybe with Occupy Wall Street to some extent, where people realized that it's always the same people paying for the riches that actually try to avoid taxes and make sure that politicians and regulation go in their interests. So this is another peak of this ongoing revolution, which is the Yellow Vest movement, and it's about protesting about injustice, tax injustice, but also in general the way politics and people being elected don't reply to the anguish and the anger of these people in the streets.
Okay, Alexis, answer me this, and then Alexandra, you tell me what you found from the people you spoke to on this particular subject. The Yellow Vest movement doesn't have a very defined leadership. If you look at the EU elections that are coming up, the Yellow Vest movement has at least 3 separate lists, which shows possibly that it doesn't have the unity of a real political movement, certainly not of a political party. So does that lack of unity suggest that people are quite clearly angry at Macron, at the whole of the system. And it's easy to be angry, but it's of course more difficult to come up with solutions. Does this lack of unity and these different voices that claim to be speaking for anyone who wears a gilet jaune, a yellow vest, does that make it more difficult to come up with solutions?
Yes, definitely. There is something with this movement that is new, is that this movement doesn't want to go into politics. They don't want to be politicians, and they don't trust politicians anymore. The Yellow Vest people that want to go into politics are disavowed by the other Yellow Vest protesters, saying they are not one of us. They are betraying the movement. The goal of the movement is not to finish as a political party, because it's all about saying that political parties are not answering anymore the needs of the populations. So it's not the end of the movement to transform into a political party. And if you look at leaderships, of course you have several known figures that are speaking on TV and trying to organize the movement, but they don't want to be seen as leaders. It's something that is very clear. If you look at Eric Boulot or Jérôme Rodriguez, who's been hurt and lost an eye in a protest, they don't want to be politicians, and they don't want to be seen as charismatic leaders. They just want to be here to actually say what the other people can't say, or make sure that the revendication of the Yellow Vest are heard and clearly understood by the political elite.
But heard by whom exactly? I mean, or who is Macron expecting to hear from? If he's opened a grand debate, he could be hearing from tens of millions of people with some general idea that they want their lives to be better.
Yeah, but I think that's actually the idea behind this grand debate. I mean, I completely agree with Alexis when he said that this movement is deeply anti-establishment. The last thing they want, I mean, they are against Macron government, they have very strong words. I mean, I don't think we've heard anything that violent against a French president in a very long time. But it's not only against Emmanuel Macron and its government, it's against the political system in general. It's all about like the disconnect that they feel that exists between them and the people who are supposed to represent them. So they know that the risk is to basically become a political party and then not to be the kind of like popular movement, if you will, that they want to be. Now, on the other hand, I mean, I met some of the people who are now leaders, and even if they don't agree and if they don't like you to call them leaders, that's actually what are they de facto becoming. So that's when it's going to be a bit difficult for the movement to kind of like survive and to unite. Most probably what you're going to see is a movement that is going to get fragmented, with some people who are going to follow the people who want to go like on the political side, and then you will always have like the people who were suffering, who took to the street just because they wanted more money and less taxes, and who might have the feeling at the end of the day that they're not represented anymore.
You told me you met somebody who earns €1,300 a month. You told me about a farmer who, after paying his bills, has how many euro a month to live on?
€200 a month left after paying for all the taxes. What we have to say is like, we met a lot of people, and we realized that the minimum wage in France is roughly €1,300 right now. And it's far from being enough. I mean, with all like the taxes who really have been up for like the past few years. So you have the feeling that more and more people are struggling, and earlier in the months. Now you've got this very kind of like French specificity of like the farmer cases. And in the case of the farmer, we met a few of them as well. And I mean, especially this one that is featured in the documentary, and that really like showed us. I mean, we saw all his accounts or whatever. After, he doesn't make much money to start with, but he still has to pay almost 60% taxes, and then another 20% taxes. And then at the end of the day, he's left with basically 200, as you say. So.
Okay, let's pick up on this issue of finances, okay, both personal finances and government finances. Alexis, so there's also a clip I heard while I was reading the news a few weeks ago, an elderly man saying, I don't have enough money to be able to take my grandchildren to McDonald's. I mean, that's like a basic thing in the West, to be able to buy a Big Mac for your grandkids, right? But Alexis, some people say the French government is bust, that actually Macron can't solve these people's problems Because like in many Western capitalist countries, the debt reservicing is so expensive that actually he doesn't have the money to spend the amount that he would have to spend to satisfy these people's demands, some of which are very basic, just make our lives a little bit better.
Yeah, it's a problem of course, the state public debt. It's how much money you can spend in public services to make sure that life is easier for a lot of these people. Free school, free health insurance, transport, education, of course. All this is part of the equation. The problem is, where do we get the money? Where are the taxes? And so far, the taxes are always been to the workers and saying, we'll tax the workers, but we won't tax the capital, or we won't tax the rest because, you know, they make us elected, they pay for the campaign, and we are friends. Macron is in this trouble because he started his mandate by suppressing the tax on the riches, the ISF. And this is all where it started saying, why is it always us, the middle class, the lower class, that have to pay for the other who can actually manage tax evasion or tax optimization? Yeah. This has to end. It's all about justice and saying, if you look at tax evasion, it's about 80 billion euro that you could get into the state budget. What Macron can't do, apart from trying to tackle tax evasion, is make sure that employment is raising in France and that you get paid for your job. If you look at the past decades, all governments in Europe have been working hard and making sure that you don't get paid much more for your work, and the price of work is staying at a lower standard, because then you get employment. If it's too expensive to pay workers, then there won't be creation of jobs. That's
Alexis,
what economics people that are actually, yes.
We're running out of time, and I want to ask you, as an EU affairs expert, how many other leaders around the EU are going to be looking at Macron's situation and thinking that actually this is a crisis of capitalism? The system that is in place in most of the Western world actually is now proving that it can't take care of the majority of the people, and those problems in France might be coming to my country next. Fairly briefly, if you could, please.
I think everybody's looking at this crisis like, oh, look, after Macron, there will be a European Trump or a French Trump saying that enough is enough. We can't do with this world business game where the people that are actually working are not earning enough for a living. The question is, how do you change the system and move from this capitalism to another one that is more close to the people and make sure that everybody is winning? Emmanuel Macron can't answer on his own, and even the European Union, with all that has been built in the past 50 years, can't answer. If you look at the Brexit issue, the migration issue, we're still in a crisis time, so it will take a lot of years before you actually turn the system to make it work for everyone.
Okay, one final question to you, Alexandra, and I want to play the pictures that we have of last Saturday of left and right-wing elements of yellow vests fighting each other. So it comes back to what we were talking about a lack of unity. Did you find that, or were people that you were speaking to so sort of set apart from the politics and were simply addressing their own particular issues in their daily lives? Because that disunity is really something that, as we've discussed over these past 12, 14 minutes, is a problem not only for Macron, but also for the yellow vests themselves.
I think the disunity is probably more during the protest. And what we have to remember is, like, the majority of the yellow vest people are not going to protest in big cities for various reasons. But what I saw really on the roundabouts was a lot of solidarity. And that was really like what people were saying as well, is like, we don't feel alone now. We just realize that other people feel exactly the same way. So it's basically us and the government and us people, like 80% of France, almost a kind of like 99% that we can even like talk about. So, I mean, I think, yes, in Paris or in other big cities, you can see some kind of like tensions between protesters. But I would say that as a movement, from what I saw, it was still quite united.
Alexandra, look forward to watching the programme. Alexis, thank you very much indeed for joining us from Paris. Right, just to remind you that this documentary, Off the Grid, The Yellow Vests Driven by Despair, it's called, it premieres this Saturday, 16:30 GMT here on TRT World, and Alexandra really wants you to watch it.
We believe that Valentine's is an issue, a custom which has no association with our religious laws and our religious values.
Religious hardliners in Pakistan are protesting against Valentine's Day. They say it doesn't fit with their Islamic faith. The holiday stems from a day of feasting in honor of a Christian saint, but today it's viewed by most as a secular occasion, and it's marked, of course, with romantic gestures, cards, flowers, sweets. But some Pakistanis say, not in my town. One university there has even pushed for February the 14th to be called Haya Day, celebrating the Islamic principle of modesty. Well, both of our guests are in Islamabad. Arguing against Valentine's Day is Asif Luqman Qazi, a special advisor to the Islamic political party Jamaat-e-Islami. More in favour of the holiday, Farzana Bari is with us. Farzana is Director of Gender Studies at Quaid-e-Azam University. Thank you very much indeed, both, for your time. Asif, what have you got against a holiday that really is supposed to bring people together and make people feel that they're part of something greater than just being on their own?
Yes, thank you, Adnan. Valentine's Day is against our social norms, and it's against the very social fabric of our society. It contradicts and it violates our religious teachings, and religion teaches us, men and women, to have relations within the bond of marriage. This festivity or this day, it promotes relationship between men and women outside the bond of marriage, and it promotes certain trends and behaviors that are not in conformity with our social norms. So that's why we do not want this foreign element inside our society. It's not an organic part of our society, of our social norms and our culture. It's a foreign element, and the society does not approve of it. Nobody would like to his daughter or his sister to go on a date with a stranger, with someone they don't know on this day. This day is against the social norms of our society.
Farzana?
I think, I don't know. There are so many. We live in a globalized world, and there are so many things, like I think there is a lot of shared cultures now across borders. And I think it's a very narrow understanding of also a Valentine Day, although I personally feel that all days, whatever you say, it is part of consumerism in a capitalist economy. However, I think Valentine Day is particularly is about actually love. And it's, in our society, he's quite right, that in our society, especially if two adults are outside marriage, if their love is declared as a crime, basically. However, the people do not stop loving each other, and as a result of that, every day people get killed in the name of so-called honor. In my view, Valentine Day, in any case, has moved beyond like only a romantic love, although I think romantic love is a fundamental right of every adult individual. And this is also a misinterpretation of Islam, because Islam does allow both, adults to meet, each other. The consent of two individuals is fundamentally required in the contract before they enter the contract of marriage. That means how do they, what does that tells you? It tells you that Islam allows people to meet with each other and try to have that kind of understanding. And if they like each other, only then they can enter the marriage contract. So I think there is also a lot of misinterpretation of religion, and the religion is being used to suppress human feelings. And as I said, no matter how much people will put restrictions, people cannot really, stop loving each other, and that's happening all the time in Pakistan. So
okay,
I
listen,
think it's.
I would want to put some of the points that you've just made to Asif. Asif, in the age of the internet, surely it's impossible to keep the outside world from interfering or influencing, would be a better word, influencing whichever country you're in. We're talking about Pakistan. There is a massive diaspora of Pakistanis all over the world. I'm talking to you from Istanbul, for goodness sake. I'm being influenced by Turkish culture, and I'll take that wherever else I go in the world. You can't keep the outside world away.
No, we do not want to keep the outside world away. It's a global village, and it's an interdependent global village. So it's not just the Western culture that is present in this global village. More than 1.5 billion Muslims live on this planet, and they have certain social ethos, they have certain religious values, and we think that those religious values should be respected. As far as the question of marriage is concerned, it's quite natural that to be attracted towards a member of the opposite gender. There's nothing wrong in it. But the way it works in our society is that young men and women, they live inside families. And if he or she likes someone, so they do not approach directly, they do not approach that individual directly. They are approached through families. So we have a different social structure.
Okay.
And to say that we have to follow the West and we must follow the West.
No.
I think
listen, I don't think it's that. But tell me something. How much in Pakistan is culture and religion intertwined to the extent that the way you're suggesting that they can't be separated? Because you're talking about social norms, cultural norms, and religious norms, and you're almost talking as if all three of those are almost exactly the same thing.
No, for us in Pakistani society, religion is a significant part of our cultural values and our social norms. What Valentine Day promotes is lustful desires. It's not love. I think it's insult to the sentiment of love. Love is an exalted human sentiment. Love is something very different than lustful desires. What Valentine Day teaches young men and women is to pursue lustful desires and to be intimate with each other and to have physical and sexual relations. This all leads to these kinds of relations, and certainly not just Islam.
Okay.
All major religions of the world.
Okay, Asif, listen, we're going to be running out of time. We've covered that particular angle. Asif, if you don't mind, we've covered that particular angle, and I completely appreciate what you're saying, and I absolutely get it. But let's just extend the discussion a little bit further. Fazana, we're talking about Pakistan, a country where people have lost their lives, who have been killed for daring to speak out in favor of people who are simply accused of blasphemy. There is a great division in Pakistani society in terms of those who believe that Islam should dictate almost everything that happens in daily life, and those who believe that actually it's possible to be a good Muslim while observing some less strict practices in terms of how you go about your daily life. How dangerous is this kind of attitude towards Valentine's Day, which many people around the world consider to be completely harmless? How dangerous is that in terms of creating more divisions in Pakistan?
I think it's a very dangerous trend because we are not allowing people to live their lives the way they want to. This kind of this increasing radicalization, in our society is actually a major challenge, and particularly the interpretation of religion, which is coming from these religio-political parties. It's a very kind of a fundamentalist Islam, because in Pakistan, if there is any progressive interpretation of religion, the people and the scholars are getting killed as well. And I feel like this kind of expression of love where people, and it's the people's fundamental right, whatever if people are celebrating, for example, their birthdays parties. I mean, birthdays also, in our culture, we never celebrated birthdays, but nowadays, even in villages, people are celebrating their, birthdays or their wedding anniversaries and all that. And similarly, I think Valentine's Day is a day which there are a lot of people who want to celebrate, and nobody has a right to, threaten them. Or if there are parties around in the city, Jamaat-e-Islami types of organizations, and there are some other fundamentalist organizations, they'll go around and they start attacking those parties and all that. And I feel that this kind of intolerance actually is creating a lot of
Farzana, how much is this?
society.
How much is this a patriarchal issue as much as a religious one?
No, it has nothing to do, as I said, with religion. I think it is about controlling women's sexuality and also controlling, particularly women's sexuality. And that's why, as you said, lately in some of the universities, vice chancellors are asking the boys, that they should present hijab to women on Valentine's Day. So I think it is about just controlling women's bodies and women's sexualities and women's choices. And that's why, if you see, it's mostly men who are opposing Valentine's Days, or some of the women who belongs to these religio-political fundamentalist parties. They are coming out and they are taking this position. As far as I'm concerned, I feel the people have the fundamental rights. If they want to celebrate any occasion with their families, with their friends, with their lovers, it is up to them. I mean, as I said.
Asif, Farzana, thank you both very much indeed for your time. That's all for this edition of The Newsmakers with me, Adnan Nawaz. Check out more of our stories on YouTube, Facebook and Twitter. Remember to like, follow and subscribe. Until next time, thank you very much for watching. Goodbye.